Let's welcome Mr. Joseph. Hi, Joseph.
Hi, Ehab. Thanks so much for having me here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Great to be here.
Thank you. Tell us about your experience. I mean, you have a very long experience, almost 25 years of experience. And the interesting part is you're not from the profession, but you observed, what's happening in internal audit for the last 25 years of experience.
That's correct. So my career has been as a business journalist. Started at CFO Magazine about 25 years ago, if I can believe that it's been that long. And I was at CFO for probably most of that, 12, 13 years. Really learned from some really wonderful editors. Julia Homer was the editor-in-chief while I was there, and just taught me a ton about being a business journalist. While I was at CFO, we had the accounting scandals of the early 2000s at companies like Enron and WorldCom, Adelphia, and I covered a lot of that, wrote lots of articles about those companies and what they had done wrong and how things kind of got to the point where they were. That risk management area, I did learn a lot about internal audit, just looking at what had gone wrong at those companies. It was failures on lots of levels, but certainly the audit rules changed after that. We had Sarbanes-Oxley came out of that and really changed things for internal audit. But after CFO, I'd also worked at Directorship, which is a magazine that covers boards of directors. And while I was there, we also, we had the financial crisis where a lot of banks, really went under. Banks like Bear Stearns and some really old, great Wall Street banks went belly up over, again, just kind of a crisis of leadership and some governance failures. And working at Directorship, covering boards of directors, they were in a panic about how they govern their organizations and how those rules work and how those relationships work. And, a lot of change and reform came out of that. We had the Dodd-Frank Act after that round of failure. So we covered a lot of that work.
Great. Now, Joseph, as we said, you have a very long experience linked to the internal audit, but you're not in the profession. So it's very interesting to hear your thoughts about how internal audit, as a function, evolved in the last 25 years from your, observation.
Sure. So, and I covered some of this stuff at CFO, but it wasn't until I was at MIS Training Institute where we launched a content presence for internal audit that I started looking really much more closely about internal audit. And now I've been covering it for, I want to say 6 or 7 years. And just in that time, there's been a real transformation in internal audit. But I think that transformation happened, it started to happen a good 10 or 12 years or even longer, where internal audit is really moving out of the finance offices and the bookkeeping and starting to take a look at everything that that businesses do, that organizations do. More recently, they're looking at things like corporate culture and HR practices. A great example that came out of the Wells Fargo problem that we had here in America, where salespeople were being incented to open, false accounts. And, it was really just kind of a failure from the HR side about how these incentive packages were being written. An internal audit now is at banks and really at lots of organizations looking at incentive plans. Are we incenting our sales folks to do the wrong thing? And they're really good at looking at different aspects of the organization, different functions, different processes, and taking them apart, seeing how they're run, and providing, some feedback and some advice or some advisory work on how they could run better, how they could be streamlined, and then leaving that work to management. We were talking a little bit before we started here, and I was telling you that one of my favorite analogies for internal audit, and it's becoming more and more true, is that internal audit these days is somewhat the internal consulting firm for the organization. And again, it's just the relationships that they have through the organization, the way that they understand the business, and the way that they can bring in experts if they don't have that expertise themselves to really look at a process from A to Z, see how it works, see where the controls are, see where there could be, potential for failure, and potential to make things better. More recently, they're looking at ways to make things better and not just find the faults in processes, in functions. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, of course. There are, let's say, highlights, topics that are happening these days in the industry. From your experience and what you see, what are the key, let's say, topics or the hot topics these days?
Sure. Well, I think that what I'd put at the top of the list is probably technology, and not just technology, but innovation. Companies that have great internal audit departments, but the companies themselves have been transforming for years now, where just out of pure necessity, they've had to adopt the latest and greatest technology for whether it's how they sell things or how they communicate, how they reach the marketplace. If they haven't innovated, they're gone. The Amazon's come along, and if you were in any kind of retail space, you've had to, really move quickly and adopt the latest and greatest. Internal audit's been a little slow to that transformation. I think there was for a while a little bit of an idea of, this is the way we've always done things here. And over the last few years, they're realizing that that's just not an acceptable way to run their functions. And they're trying to move much quicker to adopt technology to be more transformative and to really just think about, change and change management. What can we be doing different? How do we use some of the things like robotic process automation, even in, artificial intelligence. They're trying to automate things more, continuous monitoring to look at, whether it's the controls that they're testing or the processes themselves. How can we automate some of this and move on to some of that higher value advisory work that I talked about earlier, that internal audit's really heading towards. So, technology is definitely the biggest aspect of it. IT audit has become, a bigger part of internal audit, and making sure that the IT systems in the organization are doing all the things that they're supposed to do, that they have the proper controls. The cybersecurity area is just massive. It's commonly shows up number 1 or number 2 on lists of concerns, whether it's by the board of directors or the CEO or internal audit itself.